There's a lot of people talking about the SP1200 sampler at the moment, and there are some new hardware devices that emulate the sound of it. There's also some plugins, and there's a certain grainy kind of texture that people really like about the SP1200. So this is a classic old EMU sampler hardware, very limited memory, and this is the key to the sound. Now, what used to happen was, because it had such a short memory, and that equates to the actual sampling time that you get, what people used to do was get a record player and they would take a break and they would speed it up on the record player so that it took, when they recorded it in the sampler, a shorter amount of time, which is a clever little trick really to make the most of the sample memory. So that was the vibe, but it had a certain grainy texture. The fact that then it was pitched back down meant that it had this kind of vibe, and people are looking for that vibe at the moment, and you can find it inside Maschine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate. We're going to take a look at how to spot the sound, identify the sound, the texture, compare the difference between a normal sampler and the emulated SP1200, because this box does emulate it, and also another classic sampler as well. So we'll take a look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate this on a chord sample. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want you to pay attention to, I guess, a musical sound. A lot of people do associate the SP1200 with crunchy drums, but we'll work towards that. Okay, so we'll start off with chords. So just going to load this chord in, and this is from Grant Nelson's collection Chordworks, some really nice electric pianos. I'm going to play around with the sound. So at the moment it's a one shot, it's playing to the very end of the sample. So what we'll do is we'll go up here to the plugin, and going to come along, going to move across to the envelope type. At the moment it's one shot. What I'm going to do is in fact just go to ADSR, which is an envelope that will pay attention to how long I'm holding down the pad. So that's perfect. So that's the chord as it is. Now what I want to do is I'm going to flip it, I'm going to make a copy. So first thing I'm going to do is duplicate. So that's up here. I'm going to duplicate again. So the new one, let's do something different. So over here, let's come back. So you can see here the engine. I'm going to move this over to SP1200. Now there's deliberately, I'm showing you here, there's not much of a difference. Because remember that story I was telling you where we have the samples being pitched down? That's when the graininess comes. So why don't we do that? Let's come across to tuning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these down 3 semitones. So listen to the first pad. Now listen to the copy, but running with the SP1200 emulation. You hear that? Let's listen to those again. Let's compare. Normal. And then the SP1200. I'm going to shift the pitch down even further. So both of these now are -5 semitones. Hear that graininess? That is the sound, the SP1200 sound. So this is emulating that texture. And this was a combination of obviously that thing that I just explained, where they were taking a record, playing it faster, recording into the sampler to take a short period of time, but then slowing it down after. So obviously it's emulating that as well, but it's also emulating the signal path. So the digital to analog converter, the electronics out the back of the SP1200. So it's emulating that to create that vibe. So hopefully that's a good demonstration of the two. And let's take a listen to the impact that this kind of an engine can have on drum samples. So we'll start with something new. I'll load up onto the next pad, a drum sample. So let me just switch to my drums. And let me go to snares. Snares are really good for being able to identify this sound and texture. Okay, I'm going to pick this one here. So that's loaded, and I'm going to now make a copy, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing again. I'm going to switch the engine so we can compare the texture. So we're going to come onto the plugin. Let's move over. So the first one we'll keep on standard. Let me just duplicate this. And the second one we'll put onto the MPC. Okay, I will show you the MPC because that's here too. But let's come back to the SP1200. And there are different versions, by the way. You can see these others. They have a slightly different kind of frequency. It's almost as if a filter is being applied on them. So that's what they are. So let's just keep it back to the SP1200 here. And once again, as I said, it's really important. I'm doing this deliberately so you can see it. It's when you pitch them down that you actually get that texture. In fact, you can also pitch them up. So it's any deviation from the normal pitch. So let's come back. Take this down. So -4 semitones. Can you hear that presence? There's something extra going on with that sound. It's brighter, it's more energetic, there's a crunch to it. I mean, that makes a big difference, right? So you can see why lots of kind of old school boom bap hip hop producers love the sound, and also quite a few house producers. Someone like Kenny Dope, for example, his drums have a very particular texture, and this kind of a vibe is going to give you that kind of sound and texture. It's a great mode. And of course, I'm looking at Maschine here. It's built in. You have lots of choices out there in terms of emulating these kind of textures, but I wanted to focus on Maschine because I love the box. And I don't think everybody realizes you can get this texture inside of the Maschine itself. I'm using Maschine Plus, so it's all standalone here, but you can do exactly the same thing in the Maschine Mark 2, 3. They have the same thing. That is the vibe. But I did mention there's also the MPC texture. Let's just have a comparison. Let's have a listen. So that is the normal snare. In fact, this one here, I'm going to switch to the MPC 60. The MPC 60 texture definitely has a graininess to it as well. Slightly different tone. So I'd encourage you guys to experiment. And actually, you might find that you're never going to use your normal sampler mode again.